Hello, guys. This is the last in this series of classical versus Keynesian. Okay, so let's go straight away to the diagram. Okay, so let's go here. Okay, so this is a diagram you're quite familiar with. As I said, the similarity between Keynesian and classical is this line here. Okay, the straight line in terms of both of them agree that there comes to a time when you use your factors of production, there is a limit as to how far you can extend it. Okay, it is possible to go beyond the YFE. However, that's more of a short-term scenario. So let's label the diagram LRAS. Okay, now a lot of people take this diagram and they don't really think too much about it. There's a lot more you can do with this diagram, and a lot more you can do with classical. Okay, classical is a very, very important diagram because of the, especially because of the SRAS. Okay, you get a lot of questions on SRAS in terms of like oil prices or commodity prices change, and you have to be able to show that. So classical is very, very important. Another point, another reason why classical is extremely important as well, if you're trying to show inflation as part of your evaluation, it helps you to show inflation. Okay, so we'll go over that, but let's deal with the Keynesian. Okay, so everybody, you know, you're all familiar with this. John Keynesian had the viewpoint that you only have one supply. It's not divided into short run or long run. Supply is supply. Okay, and the idea that people are going to drop their wages demands and accept much lower wages is a fallacy. Okay, he was of the opinion that wages are sticky downwards, and I think you know what that means. Sticky downwards. In other words, people are not willing to drop their wage demands and take much less pay. And we talked about three reasons why, in the short run, you can't actually lower people's wages. So, in the short run, it's fixed. But he was of the opinion that supply. Keynesian was of the opinion supply. And this the idea that the economy is going to self heal. If we're going to wait for the economy to self heal, we'll all be dead. That's what he said. And this became really popular in the 1930s when they were trying to recover from the recession. They were following the classical viewpoint and nothing was happening. And then that's when John Keynesian came along and said, look, you've got to have some sort of government intervention. So let's start off with government intervention. Let's show you. I mean, okay, so if you have AD here currently, so what's the state of the economy? Remember I said the equilibrium will be LRS where AD meets LRS. So that this is the point. Okay, so you're at Y here. Okay, let's just call this Y. Okay, that's where you are. This is now YFE. So again, you can see, let me just bring this up a little bit so you can see. Okay, so this is YFE. So as you can see, the economy is in what you call a negative output gap. This gap between here and here, between Y and YFE, is what you consider as the negative output gap. Okay, that's the negative output gap. Okay. Um, Again, negative output gap is the distance, is the difference between the potential, which is YFE, and the actual, which is Y. Okay, so this is where the economy is. So what John Keynes was saying is that if you're going to keep the economy like this at AD, which is Y, we're going to continually be in recession. Okay, you have to do some sort of government intervention. And we're talking about fiscal, okay? Fiscal, we're talking about government intervention. Okay, remember, don't get it mixed up. The government cannot get involved with the monetary policies. That's the Bank of England, okay, or the banks. But what the government can do is fiscal policies, taxation and spending. Okay. So what he was saying was of the opinion that get involved, do a fiscal policy, expansion fiscal policy, shift the AD to AD1. Okay, so you're now getting nearer to full employment. You're getting nearer to full employment. You're not actually at full employment, but you're getting nearer. And what he was saying was that look, you won't necessarily have inflation. Depends on where you are on the LRS curve. So when you're talking about Keynesian, be really, really go into detail and make it specific. It is possible to shift AD without causing inflation according to the Keynesian model because of spare capacity. Don't forget all these places here, all these spaces here, which you can line here. All this is spare capacity. Okay, unused resources. And because the resources are available, cost of production is not going to go up. So the price level is not going to go up at all. Okay, the price level is not going to go up. So don't forget to talk about that. And also this point here, I don't know whether you've heard of it, but if you look at your books, it talks about a bottleneck. Okay, bottleneck simply means supply constraints. In other words, before you get to LRS, before you finally get to full employment, you could have a few problems regarding supply before you actually get to that full employment. It could be a matter of, just supply problems before you actually get to full employment. Okay, so what he's simply saying is that there could be issues in the supply chain before you eventually get to full employment. Okay, so just bear that in mind. If you hear about bottlenecks, that's what it means. It's this part here. This part here that is what you call bottlenecks. So remember when you're talking about the Keynesian diagram, think about multiplier, think about utilizing the multiplier, think about the spare capacity, think about the bottlenecks, think about how far are you from the YFE, okay? And the main, like I said, the main difference is that the Keynesian just was of the opinion that just one supply curve is not divided into short run, long run. And this idea that people will accept lower wages, it's just not going to happen because wages are sticky downwards. Okay, they did agree in terms of the long run capacity. Okay, there was no doubt about that. They did accept the fact that you can utilize your factors of production up to the point of LRS, and you have to shift it outwards. And they're both of that opinion. You have to shift it outwards. Okay. Remember what I said. If you're going to argue about inflation, classical is something you could consider because if you're not at full employment, you can still show inflation. Okay. Again, but we're talking about the Keynesian model. Think about spare capacity. Think about bottlenecks. Think about um, expanding the economy without experiencing inflation. Think about, you're speaking about fiscal policies, okay? Government spending, um, reduction in taxation, aiming to shift it outwards to reduce the negative output gap, okay? Use those words, those key words, okay? If you're not operating at the full potential, you have a negative output gap, okay? If you go beyond the LRS, which I showed you in my previous diagram, you actually have a positive output gap. So try to utilize the keywords. Okay, so think a little bit more about the usage of these diagrams. They're both very, very useful. You can use either, you can use both. They're both very useful, but make sure it's relevant to the way you've answered the question. It matches the way you've answered the question. Okay, so I'll leave it like that. This is quite relatively straightforward. It's a bit more straightforward than the classical model. Okay, so that's the end of the series in classical versus Keynesian. So you will get questions on this, and hopefully you'll be able to answer them. Okay, have a good rest of the weekend, and I shall see you next week. Bye bye.